And now, from God's Unchanging Word Studios in New Orleans, we are pleased to bring you news, nuggets, and insights with today's host, Tom Carey.
Passover, a celebration of deliverance, of freedom from bondage that God's people experienced before the Exodus from Egypt. But Passover is also a story of God's redemptive love. It is my story, and it is your story, if we choose to embrace it and embrace Him. Sea-soaked carpus and the bitter herb remind us of the tears shed in slavery under Pharaoh's thumb, a reminder that life in bondage without redemption is a life drowned in tears. The Passover lamb points to the God of Israel who, in His unwavering commitment to deliverance, rained down plagues on Pharaoh's Egypt. The worst of these came in the darkness of death's shadow. But God's outstretched arm shielded Hebrews from harm, giving one narrow way to escape, through the covering of each door with the blood of a spotless lamb. This, the one measure of obedience meant to save every firstborn son, a sacrifice in blood. It was by this sacrifice that freedom was secured. Death passed over the blood-painted doorposts. They were spared a swift judgment and delivered from Pharaoh because of the blood of a lamb. Heeding a warning from God that Pharaoh would pursue the Israelites in their exodus, the Israelites took with them unleavened bread. And so, with Passover, leaven is removed from the home and the heart, since leaven is a reminder of the past and of sin. So why should we dwell on such a story? Perhaps because our own often self-serving choices can once again enslave us, making us deaf to the voice of the one who wants us to experience true freedom. Only He can deliver us from the delusion that we know best. Without Him, we are as alone as the Israelites in the desert of Egypt. Only by crying out to the God of Israel and accepting His sovereignty can our bondage be broken. The Passover Jesus shared with His disciples at the Last Supper signaled the end of blood sacrifice. He paid the ultimate price when He died at Calvary. As the Son of God, He came to deliver us from more than just the slavery of Pharaoh, but from our own sin, so that death will pass us over. Jesus is the Afikomen, broken, buried, and brought back. He is the sacrificial lamb, the blood on the doorposts of our hearts, and by His death and resurrection, He brands us, all of us, free, forgiven, and loved. If this forgiveness of sin and eternal life He offers is yours, you can eat this bread and drink this cup meaningfully. And if you've never known His redemption, but sense it and want it, He is waiting to free you and call you one of His own.
Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to God's Unchanging Word and another edition for our news, nuggets, and insights. And today is Friday, March 26, 2021, and welcome to this very special Passover news, nuggets, and insights. We're going to dispense from a lot of the horrible news that's out there. We're going to focus on one of the stories, though, we think is very important. I didn't want to put off till next week, but believe me, it'll get worse, so they'll still be there next week. But today, this program comes to you on Friday, and just preceding the Passover event of Friday evening. Very special time for us here, and hopefully for all of you there. So we're going to get into the recent Dead Sea archaeology that's going on. We're going to talk about the continued siege on the evil of our youth. And then we're going to pick up on what I began last week with King Hezekiah, and I'm going to focus on the restoration part of his life of reinstituting the Passover in the days of unleavened bread, as God said that had not been kept like it was with him since Solomon and David. All right, so let's get right into the program. So we're going to have a lot more videos today than we normally have. So we're going to begin our program today with another video. This one is Passover by Viktor Frankl. Let's play that video and I'll be right back.
Passover, the holiday that celebrates what it means to be truly free. But what is freedom? Viktor Frankl, a prominent Jewish psychologist, was a survivor of 2 concentration camps. When he was liberated in April 1945, almost everyone in his family had been killed. Based on his experiences in the camps, Frankl wrote the best-selling book, Man's Search for Meaning, where he describes man's primary need for meaning as the key to living. He writes, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing. The last of human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. The Nazis took everything away from him. His clothes, possessions, his family. He sat there, huddled in the cold barracks, starving, exhausted, and heartbroken. He felt like he had nothing left. And then it hit him. The Nazis thought they had total command over him, that he had no freedom left at all. But there was one thing they could never take: his choice, his response. Frankl writes, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is the power to choose our response. In that power lies our growth and our freedom. By realizing he maintained the power to choose, he clung to his humanity and dignity. We do not have the freedom to choose the environment we are born into or the conditions we find ourselves in, but we always have the freedom to choose how to respond to any given set of circumstances. We often make the mistake and think that others are responsible for our lives. Our parents, our boss, our spouse, the community, the economy, the president. We blame or make excuses. In reality, I am the only one responsible for the success and failure in my life. When we allow other people or situations to dictate how we feel, we give up our freedom and enslave ourselves. Freedom means recognizing that we are the ones in control, that we are responsible. As the sign on President Harry Truman's desk said, the buck stops here. This is why matzah is called the bread of freedom. Bread is just puffed up matzah. It's water and flour full of hot air. The number one impediment preventing us from achieving greatness and living a life of freedom is our puffed up ego. Our ego distracts us and causes us to blame everyone else for our problems and failures. This Passover, ask yourself, what's really holding me back from grabbing life by the horns and living it to its fullest? Where am I not taking full responsibility for my life? As you eat the matzah, break through the shackles of your excuses and taste freedom.
And thanks to the blood of Jesus Christ and removing all our sins, our shackles are gone. It's our opportunity to move forward as we rededicate ourselves this Passover to begin the rest of our lives as we march to the kingdom of God and wait for the return of Jesus Christ. Now, before I forget, I want to thank the people at the Aish.com and the Jews for Jesus for some of the videos that we're using today to help with the program. You know, very well, like the program, the video you just saw. And this one here that we want to play for the children. Now, we had played this one before, so we're going to play it again. So get the kids ready, because this is a great little video. Let's play this.
Is this the real life? No end to slavery, caught in Pharaoh's vice, no escape to reality. Open your eyes, look up to the skies and see. God will redeem you so miraculously, 'cause 10 plagues come, then we'll go. Blood and frogs, lice and boils. Moses, you are dreaming. This could never happen to me. To me. Pharaoh, let my people go to fulfill our destiny. With the Torah we'll be free. Moses, tell your God I've just begun. My heart is hardened. The Hebrews are here to stay. Pharaoh, wild animals running loose. Soon you'll wish you'd never been born at all. I see cattle dying, clouds of locusts swarm. Fire and ice, fire and ice. Plague of hail is coming. Thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening me. Days of darkness, darkness. Days of darkness.
We cannot see, we cannot move. Condemn this war crime fiasco.
Listen here, Pharaoh, let my people go.
Who is God? No, we will not let you go.
Let us go.
Who is God? We will not let you go.
Let us go.
Who is God? We will not let you go.
Let us go.
Will not let you go.
Let us go.
Never let you go.
Let us go. God in heaven, it is midnight, let us go.
The angel of death has now taken our first war.
That hearts are free.
Moses, take us out to the desert to die.
Jump in the water and watch God carved out by a Egyptians, so we can get out of here.
Passover revolution.
No, Hametz, we're free.
Time to get the Torah.
Time to get the Torah and be free.
Well, we hope you like that. We got more videos, a lot more coming up down the road here. All right, this is going to be our one most serious story today, and it's all going to be in a theme that we began back in December 25th, just last year. It's amazing. I'm bringing it in today to show you how fast things are moving, some of the things we talked about that was going to happen. Back then, we talked about a threefold assault on our youth in the future of America. So let me pull those in right quick and show you what we're talking about here, because I've actually got a copy of pieces of this bill now that they were talking about bringing in just 4 months ago. This is the Washington State House Bill 2288, establishing health care centers in schools. All right, not just anywhere else, but these are in schools where the kids don't even have to talk to their parents about treatment that they're actually getting. It says parents shut down in legislature while speaking against school health centers. So it doesn't seem like a bad thing until you understand that parents, starting at the age of 13, have been completely cut out of knowing what their children are receiving in their medical and mental health care. This was according to the information of Informed Parents in Washington. So she's referring to the new law that went into effect this year that keeps sensitive conditions, including anxiety and depression, gender dysphoria, the STDs, and reproductive issues, confidential between healthcare providers and patients over the age of 13. It breaks down, I'm going to show you in the paper in just a few minutes what we're talking about here. So here, providing health care to minors under Washington law. This is basically some of the things that you're going to find in there. So now I know you can't see everything that's in here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to zoom it up just a little bit here and show you what we're talking about. It's in basically 3 categories. First, the minor consent sufficient for confidential care. What that's saying, like, all we need is for the child to tell us, you can work on me. That's all they need. They don't need parents or anything else. Then there's a category here where sometimes parent consent is required or just notified. So it'll go all the way through here of what you need to do with a parent or not need to do with a parent. So now, let's take this and move this up to the categories I want to talk about now. Still, it's a little small, so I'm going to come to this area right here. So I'm going to blow that area up right now so you can see that this is areas that do not need parental consent. All right? Just the child is okay. So let's bring this in and show you what we're talking about. Sexually transmitted disease testing treatment, including HIV. That means the kids now know that there can be as promiscuous as they choose, including be the homosexual activity, which brings in the HIV, knowing that it'll never get to the parents. So what you're doing is you're unlocking some of the parameters to, at least in their minds, saying, boy, if my mom or my dad ever catches me. The second, birth control services. So if they happen to get pregnant, or they're trying to keep from getting pregnant and they want to have out of marriage sex, well, then they can get treatment for that. Oops, let me back it up. Abortion services. Now they can even, a child from 13 to 17 years of age can go to the school doctor now and tell them I need an abortion, and the parents will never know they had it. You can't make it up. Prenatal care services, outpatient mental health treatment. Supposing the child is suicidal, wouldn't the parent want to know to treat at home to help with the children? Inpatient mental health treatment and outpatient substance abuse treatment. So if they become hooked on drugs, fentanyl, heroin, you name it, they can get treatment, and again, the parents have no idea what's going on with some of the kids. This is a roadmap for disaster, what they're doing here. And it takes away all the rights that God had preserved for a parent and put them into the hands of a school and government. But I'm bringing these in to show you how fast things moved from when we talked about this back in December. So now, in the Can't Make This Area Up, this is part of what we brought back then with the working on the children. Transgender activist calls for all children to be put on puberty blockers. This was the second thing we covered. Transgender activity calls for all children to be placed on puberty blockers until they can decide their gender. So that means that a child 6 or 7 years old who has no idea what's going on, they're going to put them on a puberty block if this passes, until they're old enough, and by that time, who knows what will happen with their own bodies. The transgender activist known as, popularly as Xenia Jones, is publicly advocating a policy that would put all children on puberty blockers until they decide their own gender. The reason behind this is that children are already consenting to their permanent, irreversible changes. Now, what she's trying to say is this. If you're born a girl or you're born a boy, that's the way you're going to grow up. So that's not right, is what she's saying. Whatever God has designed in the creation of that child, male or female, they are, what they're saying is that's not right, because the person should have their own right to decide who they are. So that comes naturally through puberty, she says, and they should not be allowed to legally consent to puberty. They should be allowed to be legally consent to puberty blocking hormone treatments as well. This was the third thing we covered. Schools now are preparing to train children for Marxist BLM curriculum. This is what we said they were going to begin doing. That was back in December. They are doing it. Many states, many curriculums have already done it. Some states like Texas and Florida and some of the more conservative states are fighting this and preventing this from getting started. Activist educators are allowing radical movements to warp the children's worldviews. Public schools nationwide, they're adopting Black Lives Matter curriculum, presenting themes such as systemic racism, police brutality, and white privilege, while teaching the children the theology of Marxism according to the Federalists. These are socialist policies that are bringing in socialism and eventually into communism. This is what they're teaching the children from the youngest of ages. By the way, this is the exact same thing they did in Russia and they did in Germany when Hitler took over and brought in socialism. So now, this gets carried into today. This is just 4 months later that all this was going on, and this is talking about the Equality Act. The Equality Act, let's get into that now. It's H.R. 5, and this is off the government website. The bill prohibits discrimination based on sex, sexual orientation, gender identity in areas including public accommodation, facilities, education, federal funding, employment, housing, credit, and the jury system. So it doesn't matter who you are, male or female, whether you're a transgender or whatever you are, that everybody has to be treated equally. Specifically, the bill defines includes sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity among the prohibited categories of discrimination of segregation. Now you say, well, everybody should be treated equal. Well, this is far-ranging. So now I got a video here from a congresswoman. It's only about 3 minutes long. I want to play that, and she goes into some more of the specifics to show you why this is a real problem. All right, let's play that video.
Congresswoman Debbie Lesko from the state of Arizona. The Equality Act, or I call it the Forfeiting Women's Rights Act, it takes away women's and girls' rights that we've fought for years. It requires organizations such as schools, churches, university dormitories, or nonprofit organizations to allow biological males in traditionally women's spaces, like women bathrooms, women locker rooms, women's showers, even without any type of medical diagnosis or psychological diagnosis. This really infringes on the rights of women and girls to have their privacy and to have safety. The Equality Act would require doctors to give sex change operations and sex-changing hormones to adolescents, even if the parent disagrees and doesn't give permission. Women and girls that take these sex-changing hormones are then sterilized for the rest of their life. People need to wake up. This radical bill is going to totally eliminate women and girls sports, because what this bill does is it requires schools and universities to allow biological males compete in women's sports. The so-called Equality Act would really take away all of our constitutionally protected religious freedoms. It strips out of the language the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, the first time in history that a bill has done this. This will be terrible for anyone that has religious objections. The Equality Act is such a terrible bill that I really needed to speak out about it. It gives protections to some over protections of the others. This is not equality at all.
We need to pray that this bill does not go forward, because if it goes forward, this opens up the floodgate of the persecution, the problems that's going to come upon not only this nation, but upon the church, and the preaching and the outreach that God has called us to do. So now, where does that go? If you don't think this can get really bizarre, if that bill passes, we're getting a look at what can happen in Canada. And what happens in Canada eventually finds its way south to America. This is talking a story about a person, a dad, got 5 years, or he's facing 5 years in prison for calling his daughter a girl. The girl's moving into her change, thinks that she's a boy. Father jailed for calling transgender child his daughter using the wrong pronoun. That's not being made up. This is real. There are laws covering this now going on in California and in Washington State. Right now they're trying to do this very same thing. That if you're not using the right pronoun, that's abusive, and then you can be challenged and put in jail like this parent did. It says, imagine you notice a sudden and unexpected change in your daughter's dress, the demeanor and the behavior. Then imagine discovering that without consulting you, the school had been telling you your child is a boy in a girl's body. Can happen here? Well, we just covered the law in the state of Washington that says the school can do this. It's passed. So this can begin to happen in America. Going on. Worse yet, imagine discovering that the school has superseded your parental authority by arranging to have your daughter secretly injected with life-changing, irreversible hormones. Because that's what they did in Canada, and that's what they will be doing here in the United States. It's the government taking over parental rights. What they've done here, this is from the parent. This is the dad who actually was facing 5 years in jail now. He was actually put in jail for disobeying the court order, but not talking about what's going on with his daughter, who's actually thinks she's a boy now. With the help of the schools up there, it seems to be heading in that direction. He says what they've created a delusion, and they're forcing parents to live in this delusion, the father had said previously. So what happens, he says, when the bubble explodes and the delusion ends? She can never go back to being a girl in a healthy body she should have had. These kids don't understand what the kind of a 13-year-old is thinking about having a family and kids. That's exactly what's going on. So now, Some encouraging news. South Carolina now, a Democrat, believe it or not, has introduced a bill preventing minors from receiving gender reassignment surgery. Finally, someone is at least trying to stand up and say, listen, this is not good. The bill titled the South Carolina Vulnerable Child Compassionate Protection Act states that minors, persons under the age of 18, are banned from getting transgender surgeries and from receiving puberty blockers and hormone treatments. Violation of the proposed law, such as doctors performing surgery on a minor, can face up to 20 years in prison. Every state needs to put this into play, but they won't. But anyway, that's where it starts, and maybe it'll pick up some steam and some momentum. So what we've showed you back as early as just back in December, the things that are coming to pass, 4 months later, they're actually taking pass, laws are passed. We just showed you in Canada that they're actually in place and a person's put in jail, and showing you those same laws are going to take place right here in America. It's absolutely amazing how fast things are moving. So we, as God's people, we need to be before God day and night praying that God will intervene and stop this insane. And when God says, when you see these things, we are to pray that His kingdom to come very soon. Cut this time short, because it's not going to get any better from everything that we're seeing here. Unbelievable. Now, we didn't want to cover a lot of the other things like the border going on, because that's an absolute horrendous mess. And if you're following news, you already know. We'll pick up some of those stories next week. But this was important. We needed you to understand that we need to be involved with our children's lives, because you see, they're under the assault of the enemy, and we need to be there for them. So I just wanted to show you how fast things are evolving, and how eventually you're going to wake up one day and realize that you have no rights with your own kids and find yourself in jail. And so will you ministers who are preaching these type of messages and sermons. They will find themselves before the magistrates, as God says, and they will find themselves in jail also, because these laws are changing. All right, let's move on now. All right, so let's get into some more, a little more upbeat things, and get into what we're here for and our calling for this season. As God says, we give meat in due season. So let's get back into the Passover now. Here's a video called "The Loving the Bread of Freedom." This is a great little video here. So let's play that, and I'll be right back.
Yearn to be free, roots long ago, in captivity, let my people go. Your first name is free, last name is dumb. To place you have seen, a nation is born. Defense of power, it's in every human being. Time of liberation, say split your wings. Freedom, freedom, freedom. Struggle for freedom, just celebrate on Passover, receive throughout history. Fighting persecution so we can live as Jews, one from Moses to Natan Sharansky. Suffragists rose up our saints, man, Tiananmen Square, got the purple finger in you right now. Ring the bell, pull the Berlin Wall down, and then we start to dream like Malala. God, you know I want your love, your mother's handmade for somebody like me. Come on now, follow God's lead. Pharaoh was finished, now you're free. Matzah, the bread of freedom, put on your shoulder, go to the desert quickly. Come on now, follow God's lead. Come on now, follow God's lead. I'm in love with the taste of you. Need and roll 18 minutes too. Although my stomach is falling too. I'm in love with my matzah. Oh, 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 I'm in love with my matzah. Oh, 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 I'm in love with my matzah. Hey. Struggle for freedom is all about you. Enslaved and beaten, that's an issue. You have a choice. Hey, challenges can make it stronger. Try and hold on a little longer. And then we have thanks in our heart. Bitterness makes you count your stars, and On a pain recall throughout Jewish history, you guided us far, and now we're free. And now we're free. So God pulled us ever closer, let us celebrate Passover as we tell our story over. Bite that matzah on your shoulder. Jewish people getting older, so many miracles to share. Faith and family coming over, have a meaningful Passover. Have a meaningful Passover. Have a meaningful Passover.
Didn't have a great beat? Have a meaningful Passover. The bread of freedom, the bread of life. Imagine 40 years in the desert. Same food every day. You had to go out and pick it up yourself. You can have it any way you want it. You can barbecue it. You can grill it, fry it, bake it. With the same bread every single day. The bread of life. The recent Dead Sea Scrolls, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but this is the first time they've found evidence of more information in over 60 years in the Dead Sea region. This is a massive 4-year study of over 550 caves in the region, and they said there's a whole lot more they haven't even gotten to yet. But they come across some things, and they was really, really excited about it. So there haven't been biblical scrolls found over there in over 60 years, according to Dr. Joe Ussel, which he is the head of the Israeli Antiquities Authority, the Dead Sea Scroll Unit, which he told Daesh in an interview recently. Said, even when such scrolls were found, they were rarely discovered by the archaeologists, and so this time we had the golden opportunity to see and excavate for ourselves. What's happened is the people in the region, many poor regions, they head into these areas and they try to find the antiquities and they sell them. So quite often there's no real evidence of how and where and all the information they really need in the discovery as archaeology does. He said, but for this time in this particular cave, they actually found something. All right, so now, this is from our people at Aish again. This was the Passover at Aish, talking about the dazzling Dead Sea Scroll fragments that were found. It's called the Cave of Horror. Here are some of the tools and the implements, and you'll see in the hand there's also a spearhead point and a couple of other instruments, looks like of war and for eating. All right, the Israel Antiquity Authority beat looters to the caves in the Judean desert discovered 2,000 years ago with the artifacts among the other historical finds. Now here is the cave. That's where they were at. And actually to get to this cave, they almost had to lower themselves on ropes to get actually into this cave. So the Cave of Horror, it says, where the Jewish men and women and children hid out until they were starved to death by a Roman siege. Many of them just actually died in the siege. Now there's the entrance to the cave. Now, this is where it's actually located in the Dead Sea region, south of Jerusalem, just to the south into the Dead Sea area. So here's some of the pieces that they found. This was some of the scroll pieces that was actually in that particular cave. So each of the people, they would have pieces of a scroll. Most of the people didn't have the money to have the full scrolls, and they would keep them. And so what you're looking at here is this is actually some Hebrew text that they actually found that was in that particular cave. They said it's inextricably connected to the revolt of the Samar bar Kochaba against the Roman rule from 132 to 136 AD. The scrolls were found among other items in the Jews who fled to the hills and to the desert to mount a resistance against the Roman Empire in Judea. So now this is actually parts of scrolls that was still in the mud area inside that cave when they got there. So here they are. They're standing at the entrance to that cave where they're actually sifting through a lot of the dirt. So they're harnessed up in the precarious conditions, it says. The archaeologists sift through the sediment at the entrance of the Cave of Horror in Nahal Hever. Now, I remember years ago when I first came into the church, the Worldwide Church of God had a massive part of the excavations that were going over in the Middle East. And so these type of excavations are still going on today. Here's a basket they found. It's the largest basket of its kind ever found. So it's a 90-liter basket. They unearthed it in the Antiquities Authority. It says the oldest ever to be found. And here it is where they found it. It was sticking out the side of the cave. It was covered in mud when they first came across it. So as they dug it, you've seen the size of it as they brought it out. So now here is some of the coins that they actually found in the cave. So many of the coins discovered in the cave actually give you, if you understood that the emblems on each of these coins, it actually gives you the time era of when they were. So in the timing of the Romans, each Roman or Roman governor would quite often produce his own coin with his own name or his own image on the coins. So that's what they have here. So now I want to share something with you today that I have here that I brought in. So when I was looking at that, it reminded me that I actually had a coin myself that I intended to use in our program a couple years ago. I said when the right time comes, I would bring it in. And then I remembered at the last minute this morning, I was preparing for this, that I have a coin also. This is a rare coin of Pontius Pilate during his time era. And this is the coin itself. All right, this is a rare, and this coin has been authenticated through that it was Pontius Pilate's. And the reason that I got it, and I was blessed to obtain it from a rare find some years ago, from 1929 from 29 to 32 AD. And the reason I went after it and got it because that's the years that Jesus Christ was on the earth, well, till 31, that he was on the earth preaching. And so in this coin, you see, and I brought it here, and I'll show it without crew because most of y'all hadn't even seen this yet, is that this coin was a bronze coin minted in those particular years with Pontius Pilate. It has Jewish information on one side, and on the reverse side, you have the Roman, and he has his name, who's being the emperor at the time. So let's see if I can read this. It says, Pontius Pilate struck these bronze coins during the years 29 through 32. The reverse of each coin inscribed with a distinctive Jewish design and the observe of the pagan symbol. The variety of the litigus, or the writing on the obverse, and the wreath with the berries upon the obverse. So showing like a wreath on his head, his name, and almost like a staff, showing that he was in charge. So this has actually been authenticated through ANAC, which is the authority of the coins. I forgot what they actually call themselves, like the numismatics of its time. So I wanted to share that with you because I thought that was pretty amazing that some of these things now they're finding more and more of before the return of Jesus Christ. One of the things that caught my attention from years ago, they always talked about finding God's Ark of the Covenant. And so one of these days they're hoping that before Jesus Christ returns that they'll find it, and it may be that they'll find it and create the problem of the armies surrounding Jerusalem. Anyway, just interesting stories that you ponder and you talk about in the work of God. All right, so now let's move on now. We're at the midway point of the program. Where we take a break and we usually bring you a little uplifting video here. Oh, I didn't change that. That was last week, Palm Sunday. So it's not going to be Palm Sunday here. We're going to talk about Hezekiah. Okay, Hezekiah. But before we do, we got a video here that was done that I was blessed to have a part of, working up with this Mark Rosinko in his video, a song he wrote himself, The Agony. So let's play this, and I'll be back in just a few minutes.
Of blood flowing down his beard in the garden of agony and fear. And he cried unto his Father, take this cup from me. My soul is deep in sorrow, will you let it pass from me? Not my will, but I give it unto thee. For the sword. I give it unto thee. The agony continued through the night. beatings till the morning light. All who saw him were amazed. They could not recognize his face. And he cried unto his Father, take this cup from me. My soul is deep in sorrow, will you let it pass from me? Not my will, but I give it unto thee. No, not my will, but I give it unto while still day. An earthquake, then the veil was torn away. His lifeless body hung upon a tree, then placed in a tomb for all to see. Who was this man? Let us bind his hand, guiding us into I guess we did not know he had to give his soul to pay the price for us to make us whole. Many years have passed into the haze since Jesus Christ died upon us big. Memories often fade away, but the agony always will remain. And he cried unto his Father, take this cup from me. My soul is deep in sorrow, will you let it pass from me? Not my will, but I give it unto thee. No, not my will, but I give it unto thee. Not my will, but I give it unto thee. No, not my will, but I give it unto thee.
Back. What a great song. You know, I felt very privileged to work with Mark Wasinko in developing that, and he went through and put a lot of time and energy to put that song together. All right, let's move on now. We're going to talk about King Hezekiah. I began talking about this last Sabbath and going into the life of King Hezekiah, but today I simply want to talk about the institution of the Passover part and show you how God was with him and what he did to bring about the restoration of the Passover like God originally had intended it. Hezekiah, 2 Chronicles 29, the beginning of his reign. Verse 1. Hezekiah was 25 years old when he became the king, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 29 years. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father had done. Look what 1 Kings 18 says, that he trusted in the Lord God of Israel, so that after him there was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor that any that went before him. It went on in verse 6 to say, for he clave to the Lord, and he departed not from following him, but kept his commandments which the Lord had commanded Moses. And the Lord was with him, and he prospered, so wherever he went. showing us the example that if you put your heart and you dedicate wholeheartedly into your calling, that God will be with you in everything you do. That doesn't mean that everything's going to go right all the time the way you think it will. Like some religions try to portray is that if you do this and God's going to bless you 100-fold, or, you know, those kind of things are crazy. But God will be with you so that you will know that no matter what you're going through, God is going to be with you and He's going to bless your efforts. He did two things. The first of His two acts was He repaired the temple. And quite incidentally, that's what we're doing here on this Passover day. We're recommitting to the covenant that God made inside us, which is the temple where He houses His Holy Spirit today. And second is He reestablished the covenant God made with Israel when they came out of Egypt. So this Friday, when you partake of the Passover, the bread and the wine, the meaning the blood and the body of Jesus Christ, what you're doing is you're reestablishing or the recommitting to and reconfirming the covenant you made with God at your calling in baptism. All right, so now let's take a look at that, see what He did here. The repair on the temple, let's look at that first. In the first month, in the first year of His reign, He opened the doors of the temple and He repaired them. So if we look at that and we see us today, what are we doing to repair our temple? We should be dedicated to the laws that bring about godliness, the laws that bring about good health. We should be able to balance the things that we do, that we don't defile the temple of God where it's housing the Spirit of God. So second is to reestablish that covenant made with Israel when they came out of Egypt. Look what He said in verse 10. Now I intend to make a covenant with the Lord, the God of Israel, so that His fierce anger will turn away from us. Now this Friday, today, as we dedicate this, 1 Corinthians tells us through Paul, is that we are to let a man examine themselves. And he talks about man in reference of mankind. Let a man examine himself, and so let him eat of that cup, all right, and eat of the bread and drink of the cup. So what we're doing here is that we intend, when we go before God to partake of the Passover at that particular time, we intend to reconfirm the covenant God made with each one of us at baptism. See, what He's going through here, the example what God's left us here, is no different than what you and I are going through today. This is the exact same process God does with us when we are called. 1 Corinthians 3:16 says this, "Know you not that you are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you?" Says 1 Peter 4:17, "For the time has come that the judgment must begin at the house of God. If it begins with us, what shall be the end of them that obey not the gospel of God?" Because we're being judged today, that when Jesus Christ comes, we won't have to stand before judgment because we are already judged in the life that we have today. That's why it's imperative that if you are called, that you need to live according to the covenant that God put inside of you at your baptism. It's imperative that we do that. So when Hezekiah began his reign at the same time as God did when He brought the children out of Egypt. This is the amazing story. It was the first month, the first day of the month. Hezekiah began preparing the people at the house of God for Passover and unleavened bread. First, he gathered all the priests and the Levites, and he goes into the temple and removes all the pagan objects. Now, think about you and I today. Let's put this in light of what we're doing today. God says He has called us to be kings and priests, or to be a kingdom of priests. So what God's doing today, what is the first thing He's doing? For those who are called to be a part of the first resurrection when Jesus Christ returns, you're being called to do what? To begin to prepare, to remove all the pagan customs, the pagan idols, and everything there is, to prepare the way for the return of Jesus Christ. So we're doing exactly what Hezekiah was doing in the physical back in his day. 2 Chronicles 29. So they began on the first day of the first month to sanctify. If you go back to Exodus 12, verse 1, it'll tell you it's the beginning, the first day, the beginning of months. So he begins at the very same time that God was working with the Israelites in Egypt. And on the 8th day of the month, they came to the porch of the Lord. So they began going into the temple. They removed the door. They fixed the doors. They go in. Now they got so much pagan stuff now. It took them 8 days to get everything out of there. It's amazing. So they sanctified the house of the Lord in 8 days. And on the 16th day of the first month, they had made an end of the sanctification. So it took them 16 full days to get sanctified, to cleanse the temple, and to be ready to take Passover. The problem was the 16th day, Passover's over. They're actually into the days of unleavened bread already. All right, so they got an issue, but they solved the issue because God had already prepared a way to do that. So Hezekiah keeps the Passover in the second month of the year, and he invites all Israel. Now, this is an important point. I'm going to bring this out in part 2 in the King Hezekiah. When God says there has not been a time that Judah and Israel had done this since David and Solomon, that is because the kingdom had split. See, they were no longer one nation. They were two nations, so to speak. Still Israelites. Judah is still a part of Israel, even though they know it as the nation of Judah. And that's the only thing I had objection to any of the videos. They talk about, oh, the Jews. They don't realize they're also Israel at the same time. So, but here's the story, is that the kings in Israel would not let their people go back to Judah or Jerusalem to keep the feast because they were afraid they would stay there and they would lose the separation. For the first time, when King Hezekiah sends out a proclamation to bring in all the people from Israel too. Many of them laughed, but many did come. Many did come from Israel. So not only is it the first time in the spiritual sense of the way God had intended to be done, but it was also in the physical sense of the nation coming back together. This again is the type of an end time message for you and I. Look at 2 Chronicles 30. So Hezekiah sent to all Israel and to Judah, and he wrote letters also to Ephraim and Manasseh, that they should come to the house of the Lord at Jerusalem to keep the Passover unto the Lord, the God of Israel. And for the king to take counsel and his priests, and they all in the congregation of Jerusalem, to keep the Passover in the second month. So for they could not keep it at that time, because the priests had not sanctified themselves sufficiently, and neither had the people gathered together themselves in Jerusalem. And the thing pleased the king and all the congregation. So God had provided a way back in the first 5 books of the Bible, so that if there was ever a time, if a person was impure, they could come a second month and take the Passover. Because it is essential that if you're going to, with salvation, like Jesus said, if you're going to have life with him, you must drink his blood and eat his flesh. In the ceremony of what we participate in, the bread and the wine, that is basically what we're doing, obeying the words of Jesus Christ. So God provided a way. If you're defiled in the first, you got a chance to come in the second month. Going on. So the decree went throughout the land. 2 Chronicles 3, verse 1 through 4. Now, actually, this is verse 7. So now, be not like your fathers, he said, and like your brethren which transgressed against the law, the God of their fathers, who therefore gave them up to desolation, as you see. And be not stiff-necked as your fathers were, but yield yourselves to the Lord and enter into his sanctuary, which he has sanctified forever, and serve the Lord your God, that the fierceness of his wrath may turn away from you. So even in our own lives, if you repent to God and you turn back to him, whatever problems you may have in your own life, it may even be something physical you've been going through, God can reach down into your life and heal you and turn back his wrath and bring you to a purification of that temple like he did with Hezekiah. Verse 9 says, for if you turn again to the Lord your brethren, and your children shall find compassion before them, and lead them captive, so that they shall come again to this land. So he went even as far in his prayer before God, so saying to the people, and it may even be if they're in captivity, that God will find favor to those who have them as captors and turn them loose to be able to come back. And he goes on to say, and they shall come again to this land, for the Lord your God is gracious and merciful, and will not turn away his face from you if you return to him. What an amazing story. So look what it says now. I'll just wrap this up here. And also in Judah, in the hand of God, was to give them one heart to do the commandment of the king and of the princes by the word of the Lord. And there assembled at Jerusalem much people to keep the feast of unleavened bread in the second month, a very great congregation. So it is with us. This year, as we begin taking Passover, it's almost as if we are coming back out of bondage. We've had a year of isolation, of separation, of COVID, where many people in your families of people who are actually in the church, some of them died this past year of COVID. Many of them were sick and in the hospital. But now, if we take with one heart and we follow our King, just like here, right? The hand was to follow the commandment of the King. So who's our King? Jesus Christ. So that we turn to Him, that we find favor, and that we will put with our whole heart our commitment to our calling, to the work of God, to the reaching out of warning of this world, and to live under the covenant of Jesus Christ. That God can turn away His wrath for you and your family and bring us to the land of promise, the kingdom of God. All right, let's take a break. All right, we're going to begin to wrap it up. March 26th from the Home Office, going out in the mail this week. Actually, it's in the mail as I speak. Beulah Land by Steve Council. Actually, that was delivered right here in New Orleans just a few weeks back. Great job. So you need to get that video if you haven't seen it yet. And then the conclusion to the pre-war normalization of America, which I delivered a little over a month or so ago. So I wanted to bring this to you also one more time. This is normally when you type in the gucw.org, this is normally what you'll see come up when you go into the news and nuggets portion of it. But Bob has set this up for us. It's called the nni.app. So if you've got a handheld device or you've got a tablet and you got access to the internet, all you need to type in if you want to watch our News Nuggets and Insights programs, and you will get every one of them. And if you zoom down a little further, you would find all the years are there, that you can go into them real quickly. They load up real quickly, and they're very easy to follow. nni.app, and you can catch up all the programs right there on your handheld device. All right, we're in it. We are here now for the Spring Holy Days, Friday night. This program comes out on Friday, so this will be tonight. Unleavened Bread begins March 28th, which is Saturday evening, and the Holy Day is on Sunday, all the way through to next Sabbath. Special 3-day weekend. Passover, March 26th, Friday evening. Sabbath, March 27th. And Sunday, Saturday evening, March 27th. That's our night to be much observed. That's where we keep it right here. So we have Sabbath services, and then we have the night to be much observed on the same night. And Sunday is the first day of unleavened bread. So Passover service this year. God willing, it'll work. You know, I've actually talked to one of the service managers, actually the service manager for the whole region here, called us yesterday and thinks they got the problem finally fixed. So he called us to see how it was working. So it did work Saturday. So hopefully it'll work this weekend. We got storms coming, potential flooding in the area, so I don't know. But anyway, we'll be live streaming if you don't have access to go anywhere at 7:30 p.m. But if that doesn't work, it's online. You can actually watch a program from last year, and you can take the Passover at your home. It's too late to send you one. All right, when you get this, it is definitely too late. So either live stream or catch it online tonight, 7:30. All right, that's it for our program. Oh, I want to remind too, if you're catching this program tomorrow on Saturday, this Sabbath, if you're live stream with us, 4 o'clock. All right, 4 o'clock. We're having service a little later, so everybody who's here can stay for the night to be much observed. And so we'll have a really. Hopefully we'll be like King Hezekiah, where much people were gathered. Get everybody together for the night to be much observed. All right, let's begin to close the program now with a video. So let me tell you a little bit about this video before you see it. Get the kids ready. What if God spoke to the prophets today? He would call down to them and he used Facebook. That would be like today, what they did back then. So this is called, what if Moses had Facebook? This is really funny. It moves kind of quick in a lot of spots, so if you watch it the first time you miss it, you want to back it up and play it again. All right, let's play that video, and I'll be right back to close the program. you like it. I watched it a couple of times because it moved pretty quick. And it just it's like wow, this I don't know who thought of that, but it's really cool. I thought that was really, really good. All right, that's it for our program today. You know, as we say each and every week, we appreciate everybody watching. I hope you enjoyed our special Passover program for you today. A lot of information coming in, and we especially hope that you have a great Passover and on days of unleavened bread season. So, as we say every week, thanks for watching, and remember to share this with everybody you know. They're going to love you for it. This time they actually might, or not. Till next week, have a great days of unleavened bread, and we'll see you next week.